Welcome to today's Automotive Fleet webinar, 2024 Fleet Tech Trends, Tackling Challenges, Achieving Goals, and Preparing for What's Next, presented by Verizon Connect. I'm Martin Ramju, Managing Editor for Fleet Trucking and Transportation Group at Bobbitt, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. If we do not get to yours, you will be contacted by email with a response after the event. I am joined today by our speaker, Terry Dell, Head of Global Technical Solutions at Verizon Connect. Terry, welcome to the webinar, and tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. As Martin said, I head up our global technical solutions for Verizon Connect. I've got about 30 years in technology and specifically fleet and mobility. I also have had some experience in autonomous vehicle AI development and also with a Class 6 commercial electric vehicle manufacturer. So I've been in and around all these vehicles that you operate and how the technology really helps you move your fleets forward.
All right, very good. So let's get started on all the trends for 2024. Give us a brief overview of what we're going to be learning today.
Sure. So what we'll share today is out of our Fleet Trends report that we've completed, which was really a survey of folks like yourselves, really getting a feel for what are the fleet challenges out in the marketplace. We'll talk about how technology can help take on some of those challenges and achieve goals as we move forward. We'll also look at some of the latest trends that we're seeing, and then a little bit about what's next for the fleet industry.
Okay, so we'll just start at the top here with the fleet business challenges, and we'll just take something right off the news headlines. But tell us about the double whammy of inflation and outpacing wages. How does a fleet maintain a healthy bottom line in this environment?
Yeah, it really is a double whammy. So, the headliner of sorts over the past few years has been the increasing costs and inflation across the board. However, when we peel back a little deeper, we find, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, your labor costs are actually outpacing what we're seeing in inflation in general. So one of the largest, investments that an organization makes is in their people and that labor cost. And we're seeing that creep up. It's up 5.7% this year alone. When we couple that with driver shortages, it creates a really significant challenge for fleet operators, right? So what we look at is what are the ways that we can help leverage technology to optimize your business operations, really make sure that we're running as efficiently as possible in all of those systems that connect, keep your fleets on the road and safe. The other piece is looking at how do we leverage technologies for better customer service and utilization, because that's going to allow us to really maximize those resources we've invested in. And when you think through some of the challenges that we faced in the past, it kind of goes down to that next bullet point of meeting customer demand, right? When we think about what has customer demand really become over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of redefining moments for us. I think supply chain is something that we are all happy to know that we've really recovered from some of the peak challenges that we saw during the pandemic response. However, we're still seeing some challenges in supply chain in different pockets, whether it's business tools you need or technologies, even in vehicles. One of the things we'll talk a little bit about today is the electric vehicle transition that a lot of organizations are going through. And when we think about what it's going to take to really transition these commercial fleets, there's a real challenge in supply and demand right now for commercial electric vehicles. So how do we help manage through some of those supply chain challenges with greater visibility and reliability of data? But also, how can we help fleets maybe extend the use they're getting out of internal combustion vehicles as they make this transition? You may be wanting to get an extra year or two out of a commercial vehicle, and how can technology help with that?
Now, what are some of the primary competitive pressures that fleet operations are facing, especially coming out of the pandemic environment and having to deal with a different economy and market situation?
Yeah, I think that we learned a lot of great lessons during the pandemic that we're still applying today. One of the things that I think really took off is the ability for just in time has really become on demand for almost anything you want. We've really seen an acceleration in deliverables. And so if we think of it in terms of, I can watch my pizza being delivered to my home in real time, but I don't really know when you're going to be here to service my HVAC system. Those types of questions are coming up. And so fleet operators are really working hard to find technologies that help us meet customer expectations as far as timeliness and service delivered, but also allow us to have a window open. One of the competitive pressures that you're going to find is when customers go out to a marketplace and they're looking for goods or services, and they may check 2 or 3 options. The internet allows them to do a lot of homework really quickly. And one of those determining factors might just be who can get here the soonest. And so our ability to really optimize all of our resources to answer the question of, hey, we can be there the soonest and we have great services and reliability. That's really the magic that you're trying to put together to compete with some of those pressures that are coming downstream to us.
Mm-hmm. So you were mentioning how technology is a problem solver, and it obviously is evolving at a much faster rate. What are some of the recent developments that increase the accuracy and scope of cost monitoring?
Yeah, it really has changed our visibility when we can take our systems on the back end. Oftentimes financial systems and fleet operation systems don't talk to one another. They're pretty disconnected, and you may get a readout to a group of folks along a time frame. But what we're able to see now is a lot more real-time view into fleet operations costs, how the fleets are actually addressing some of these top challenges, and what we can do from a maintenance standpoint and from a labor efficiency standpoint. So when you look at those 3 categories on the screen where it says reducing costs, fuel costs of 9%, that means that all of the respondents in our survey, the average was a 9% reduction in fuel costs by leveraging better technologies, a 15% reduction in accident costs, and then a 10% reduction in labor costs. And when we think through what are really the big factors that we're looking at today, it's all around safety and efficiency, right? Those are the 2 drivers that our fleet customers continue to come to us and ask for help understanding. How do we get safer? How do we get more efficient? And as you're seeing folks that have responded to the survey, they're seeing that reduction in those costs. And what we want to leverage is a better understanding of your business outcomes, really understand how your business operates so we can drive those savings even greater.
Now, of course, all of that can lead to more productivity in the field. What are some examples of how technology has enhanced the productivity?
Yes, that's a great question, because we can think about it in terms of, I reduced fuel and accidents and labor costs. That's really driving down a cost. What we really want to think is the other side of how do we increase revenues, or how do we increase customer satisfaction? And it really comes through efficiencies on the workforce side of it. So being able to use technologies that allow us to take our goods and services from a field perspective and really interlace that with location-based services, compliance. So what we're able to do is take a look at your organization and really find insights into pockets of inefficiency. And how do we root out those inefficiencies? Some examples of this can be really being able to tell time on job and, plan versus actual routing. Those are things that can eat away at 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes per job. And all of a sudden, you look at them, we figure out how to get those back in line with our estimated job times, and we may be able to add in 1 more customer appointment a day. We may be able to add in 1 or 2 more route stops per vehicle. So we're able to become more efficient, bring in more of the positive top line revenues that the company's really looking to have as we improve that customer service and we improve that productivity.
Mm-hmm. And there's a term here, fleet management technology. How should fleet managers define that, and how does it make better use of existing resources?
Yeah, fleet management technologies is a really big umbrella statement these days, right? If we look back in history, we've had vehicles on the road for over 100 years, and we know that around the 70s, we got this thing called telematics, which was really a combination of location and what a vehicle is doing. And it's matured well beyond that now to where we actually have artificial intelligence, which is driving safety, which is driving efficiency, and really allowing us to have a broad spectrum of technologies. When we think of what fleet management technology means today, if you go sit with someone who's in an operations center, they may have 2 or 3 computer screens up with 3 or 4 different boxes on each screen. It is a really complex technical web that they leverage in order to do their jobs. And so one of the things we look at in that fleet technology is how can we bring those into a single pane of glass? How many of those operations can we synthesize together so it's easier to gain insights and easier to make business decisions? And that's really how I would look at fleet technologies are. What are the technologies we've got? What's available out there? And how do we weave these together for a simplistic improvement model?
Now, obviously, GPS plays a big role in all of this, and this all builds to ROI for the fleet operation. What are some examples of ROI and cost savings? And what's also a realistic window for a fleet manager to start noticing some positive results?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, return on investment, everybody calculates it a little differently depending upon their organization and what they want to focus on. When we think about ROI, there's hard costs. We talked a little bit about, reducing the cost of accidents, reducing fuel, reducing labor costs. And then there's also some soft costs or gains that we can actually have in our return on investment. So again, talking about, well, we got more efficient. What do we do with that gained efficiency, right? How do we turn that into more revenue and productivity? And what is really an interesting number on the screen here is that 41% of the respondents said they saw a return on investment in less than a year when they deployed these new technologies. And that's a common theme throughout the feedback that we got in this Fleet Trends report. If we think about how organizations operate, it's really difficult to make an investment and hope it pays off in the next 5 years. We're really looking to leverage technologies where we can see a payoff really, really quickly. When we think about ways that can be accomplished, sometimes it can just be as simple as really analyzing how we're routing, and the ability to add 1 or 2 more jobs to an entire fleet over a month may pay for all of the technology that was paid for that month for services. So you can see a really quick return when we dig into those business outcomes and where we can really improve productivity and efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've all heard the phrase dots on a map when it comes to tracking vehicles, but what are some of the latest layers or enhancements of telematics mapping, and what are the ways that locations and data can be viewed?
Yeah, it really has evolved quite a bit from dots on a map, right? And the ability for us to add more context to these maps has really been a significant improvement in how fleets operate. We can go well beyond a vehicle or an asset and start thinking about operational insights. So if you have a commercial fueling contract, we can overlay where those stations are. So drivers and dispatchers can tell if I've got to refuel on a long route, these are the places I can do that and still be on my contract. Electric vehicles are really a pressure point. Thinking about range anxiety that you would have if you had a passenger vehicle that you drive, you have that same concern when you're talking about delivering your customers goods and services with electric vehicles. And so being able to overlay charging stations, being able to actually look at your current fleet operations and make recommendations on which routes are the best fit for an EV transition, those types of technologies being overlaid are really helping us gain a lot more insights on that dots on a map concept. And then we add in things like weather and more, and you're really able to pick the context that means the most to you so that you can have all of the information, make those best decisions in real time.
Mm-hmm. So just for people who are kind of new to the mapping and to give a sense of context, how does this compare to Google Maps, which we're all familiar with? In what ways is it better? What ways is it similar?
Yeah, so I think consumer mapping applications are fantastic. However, they can fall short from a commercial needs perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So a couple of things that you'll see when you start looking at commercial navigation as opposed to what a public app would deliver for you, think about things like, I've got certain vehicles that can only operate on certain road types. I need an intelligence layer that doesn't create routes that are unsustainable because we're out of compliance with DOT laws. I need the ability to have dynamic route optimization tools, right? So let's say you run a fleet where you're changing routes every day. It's not a set route. I'd like to have a tool where I can put in all of my stops for that day and run some what if scenarios and figure out what's the most efficient way to get there. How do I use the roads that I'm licensed to use? And how do I make sure that I don't have 2 of my trucks driving down the same street when one truck could be accomplishing that task for 2 customers? So being able to really add that context again, you don't get that when you think about the applications that run on your phone right now. Commercial navigation gives you a much broader perspective and also keeps you in a position where your vehicles are on the right roads at the right times.
Mm-hmm. Now there's another whole dimension to telematics through video usage. How does video change or enhance a typical telematics system? How does that just bump it up a level?
Yeah, video has really become a significant improvement opportunity from a fleet management perspective. And when we think about, again, I talked about we've been on the roads for 100 years with automobiles. And by 1930, we've got this model called the Heinrich Pyramid, which basically lays out, if you have this many minor incidents, it's going to eventually roll up and become a critical accident or even a fatality. And so since that time, we've seen a really big improvement in driver safety tools, right? Things like seatbelts and ABS, and it just continues to progress. And what we've got now is the ability to leverage video for a couple of key factors. When we deployed video starting 10 or 15 years ago, it was really just recording what was going on. And what we found was there was some value in watching a replay of an incident, but the real value would be how do we avoid that? And that's where artificial intelligence has come in, and we can now put cameras in the vehicles that actually give audible alerts to drivers. They will give them a heads up that they've got a driving behavior that may be unsafe and could lead to those incidents. So it allows us to really push out that Heinrich Pyramid model by reducing our overall incidents that we're facing. We had one customer, as an example, had 400 vehicles in their fleet, and they were using our telematics and location-based services, and we added in video cameras. And in a 6-month period in those 400 vehicles, by utilizing our AI dash cam, we saw a 66% reduction in harsh driving events overall and an 8.23 basis point increase in their safety score. And that really tells the story, right? It's the ability to get everybody home safe every night, safety first. There's also other factors in this you have to think about. Every accident leads to some sort of insurance impact, some sort of out-of-pocket expense, even if it's renting a replacement vehicle while that one's being repaired. The expenses of accidents really start to snowball behind the scenes. And by improving that driver score, reducing the number of accidents, we're able to see companies really drop down that cost of repair and insurance premiums. And look, the reality is, most of the folks on this call, if you think of your vehicles, you've spent a lot of time and money making them a billboard for your company, right? They all have your logo on it. They are literally out driving the streets, and the ability for you to maintain a great brand image and exonerate yourself if a corporation's accused of something that didn't happen, and we can prove that through video evidence. It's a tremendous cost savings, but it also keeps the image of your company up so that that moving billboard really is bringing in customers that want to do business with you.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through the stats on the trends analysis that you did, just on video technology and how it helps with safety aids and costs.
Yeah, so when you look at it, 39% of the respondents use some version of video. And there's a bit of a follow-up question to be asked in that, right? Which is, what type of video are we using? Are we recording, or are we using some sort of advanced technology where we can actually coach the drivers in real time, right? Think of it as, I've got a supervisor in every vehicle every mile, and they're just giving little reminders and nudges of how to behave safely in our vehicles when they're on the road. And 70% of those respondents said, look, it was really valuable, right? It was very valuable for us. And again, we're seeing almost 50% are saying, look, I saw an ROI in less than a year. And when we think about what that looks like, we had one example of a customer. There was an accident at a four-way stop. They were able to leverage the video technology to exonerate themselves, and it saved them over $200,000 in insurance claims and payouts for other vehicles and drivers that were on the road. It doesn't take a lot to recoup that investment when you think of it in terms of avoiding a single accident.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the training that fleet managers need to take the best advantage of video tools, what's a good realistic program or sequence for training?
Yeah, I think the reality is it's fairly light across all of the categories of folks that need to be trained. When we implement, we have driver experience training, you've got supervisor experience training, and then you've got safety program integration. And the tools are designed to really be intuitive, fairly simple to use, right? We don't want to create a new complexity in your organization. So the training is really the key there. And what we found that's been most important is the consistency and the follow-up. So having a driver coaching platform, it's great to get the cameras in there. That audible alert will help curb behaviors. But when we go follow up from a supervisory standpoint, really calling out the champions, the folks that are really doing well, and also recognizing who can I work with? Do I need to pull them off the road? Can we do some closed course driving training in a parking lot? Can we go through some safety training videos to really help us leverage that experience so they get the real-time feedback, but then they also get that employee development on the back end? All of that is really a fairly light load. What it really comes down to is, what's your safety culture in your organization? Who's going to be the stakeholders that are going to be responsible for it? And then how do we map out a plan to create a sustainable safety program so you get that improvement right out of the gates, but we continue to see it improve over time?
Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at these goals on the chart here, what are just some real fleet examples or anecdotes that come to mind with regards to the results of deploying video?
Yes, I talked a little bit about the four-way stop that saved over $200,000 from an accident, protection from false claims. And for those of you in the fleet world, you probably become familiar with a term called nuclear verdict, right? It's a really high payout verdict, and we're seeing a lot of that activity in the commercial vehicle space. Those are verdicts that equal $10 million or more in claims against a commercial vehicle company because of an accident. So when we think about it, it's the ability to have an unbiased witness and context to any event that occurs with our videos. And we're able to then go in and show and exonerate you from anything that was a false claim. You may also find out, wow, that was our fault. And it gives you the opportunity to highlight, what could we have done to avoid that? How can we improve our training? And that's really the second piece, is that improved driver safety. I spoke with a driver who talked about being part of one of our pilots with their company. And he said that, I found myself driving safer when I was in my own car going home from work too, right? Like the behavioral improvement carried over to all of his habits. It wasn't just when he was in the vehicle any longer. And, that's really the type of story that we love to hear, because it is about getting people home safe in our commercial vehicles, especially. But if we can help people in their own behaviors in their passenger cars, that's going to be tremendous. Reducing accident costs. It's interesting, when you spoke with a customer, about 50% of their accidents involve the drivers hitting something that isn't moving. So a fence post, a dumpster, backing into a loading dock. The ability to help remove those from possibility are really impactful as well. You think about 50% of your accidents and what you hit wasn't moving. Raising driver awareness and giving them context around the vehicle is going to be really important in reducing that cost. And then in reduced insurance costs, we're seeing more and more companies come out in the commercial space saying, look, if you want a premium reduction, video cameras are a way to do that. Here's how we implement. So they're actually looking at it, because at the end of the day, if we save on costs for our customers, for our customer fleet customers, we're saving on costs for that insurance company too. So they're all in this together. We all want to see safer behaviors on the roads. So you can find some insurance providers that actually give you a reduction in premium as well. Mm-hmm.
Now, moving from these big picture benefits and results, there's also asset tracking. And we all know vehicles are assets, but what is kind of the detailed picture of the assets that can be tracked and that can be monitored with a telematics system?
Yeah, so when you think about asset tracking, anything operating outdoors can really be tracked. There's a little bit of a size limitation, but we're moving across that threshold too. When we think of the most common uses that we might hear, things like mobile generators, off-road vehicles or unlicensed vehicles, yellow iron, you've got a backhoe or something of that nature that doesn't operate on the roads. Even starting to see it move into things like large sports equipment that retailers are selling. You drive by a retailer and they've got fishing boats out there, and those are subject to someone wanting to have that. And so being able to track the location of that for recovery of theft has become a really popular application. And also large specialty assets, copper spools of cabling are really expensive. And unfortunately, they're a theft of opportunity. And so those will literally roll off of work sites. And if we've got asset trackers inside of those large wooden spools, we can oftentimes help you know that it's moving when it shouldn't be, and then find out how to recover that.
Mm-hmm. You know, one interesting number you have here that kind of stands out is the increase in the use of asset tracking just from last year alone, from 2022. What do you think is prompting that? What's behind that?
I think some of it's creativity, right? We get a lot of customers that call us up and say, hey, I've got this thing. Have you ever put an asset tracker on it? And sometimes we'll say, no, but let's give it a shot, right? We're always looking at new ways that we can help. Those expanded use cases are also starting to apply to vehicles. So one use case that we saw was a large fleet upfitter would get 300 or 400 commercial vehicles at a time. They're not licensed for the road. They don't have DOT on them or anything like that. So they've got this parking lot full of assets and they all look exactly the same. And one of the things that we found was by utilizing asset trackers on these vehicles while they were in this lot, they were spending 8 to 10 hours a day just walking around looking for a particular vehicle. And by providing the locations of these vehicles on a map, geofencing them so we know if they've left somehow, it really gave them the ability to almost create an entirely new full-time employee because we reduced that operational overhead of walking around looking for vehicles. Now they can go to the map, they can pinpoint them, and it's really stripped out a lot of inefficiency for them.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the top goals that have been met?
I think the top goals, really goes back to theft is obviously a top of mind, but utilization has become really important. One of the things that you want to be able to look at is at the end of the week or month, whenever you want to evaluate this is, what percentage of my assets actually were utilized? And were they utilized in a time frame when there was another asset available? Is there an ability for us to maybe not replace that asset when it goes into retirement? And we can reduce that expenditure going forward by getting more efficient. So really understanding not just where the asset is, but is it being used? Is it being utilized for the purpose that we intend it for? And can we take that and either sell it off and recoup the CapEx, or is there another place where we could deploy these underutilized assets to get more productivity from our investments?
Mm-hmm. I was really interested in you mentioning the copper wiring of the spools, if I remember that correctly. What are some of the most common type of thefts or criminal incidences that can be prevented, especially with the increase in crime nationwide? I know commercial vehicles can be a target. What are just some of the incidences that you're seeing and that can be avoided?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, because it's a crime of opportunity, the targets are pretty widespread. They don't seem to be, orchestrated, well thought out. We had a university that I spoke to one time that had commercial lawnmowers and students were taking them for joyrides, right? Like those types of things are just kind of widespread. There isn't really a specific category that we've seen more or less in. One of the things that we have seen a rise in cost concern around, though, is smaller tools, right? So there's some specialty tools that folks on this webinar are using today that are fairly small, and they don't always get stolen. Oftentimes, they just get left behind. And so the cost of a leave behind is no different than a theft. So one of the things that's really gaining some traction and focus from us is how can we help with the small tools that are high value assets to make sure that they don't get left behind? So what do we do to help the driver understand I've got 7 or 8 key tools on this truck and I got to make sure I don't leave without those, because those are high cost challenges if we leave those behind. So I think that's really kind of the next vision of what you'll see is really small tools being able to track inventory and have it associated to a vehicle and reducing that leave behind cost.
Okay. I know previously you talked about fleet management technology in this, and in this next segment, we have the term field service management. So define that for us and how it applies to fleet vehicles.
Sure. Field service management is the process of delivering goods and services in the field to customers, right? So think landscaping, think heating and air conditioning, repair technicians, think cable installers, those types of field services where you're going out to a customer site, you're using mobile tools and resources to deliver that goods and service. And when we think about that change and how technology can help with that, it's really become a very critical part of the technology stack. When we think about utilizing paper notes and press hard, it's in carbon triplicate, right? Those days are gone. Customers expect us to use high-tech solutions to deliver their goods and services. They expect us to have narrow time windows. They expect us to be there on time and complete the job accurately. So when we think of field service management, it's about utilizing technology to really push out to the field real-time data and information on what is their next job that's upcoming, making sure they're in the right vehicle type, they've got the right tools, they've got the right materials to be able to complete that job, and then being able to present to the customer in a manner that says, hey, this is a high-tech company, they value me by investing in these technologies, and it really helps fine-tune that service model. If we go all the way back up to the top, right, customer satisfaction and competitive pressures are two things that were called out. And field service management can really help address those areas and have a great experience for your customer in the field.
Now, for those fleet managers who want to either create or improve a field service management plan, how can the technology help them get more granular on it, develop a more detailed plan for their field of service?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do with that is to really start off with some sort of workshop with a field services management expert, somebody that can come in and start off the day by just saying, show me how everything works. Tell me what everything is that goes into a single customer experience from your field service team. And then let's start to look at gaps in that. Let's start to look at ways that we can synthesize technology together, put information into a reliable place, and really get a plan to understand that. It's not a simple solution to go to the web and buy field services technology, because it really does become dependent upon, well, what are you using today? Are we replacing, paper tablets with electronic connected tablets? What are we looking at? So really doing a deep dive workshop and getting an inventory of what do we do today? How do we use it and who uses it? Then we can go in and figure out how to fill those gaps and bring it under a technology that makes it easier for your organization to use.
Okay. So I know you've covered a lot of trends so far, but there are some emerging fleet trends, and it seems as if you can never get through a webinar without talking about electric vehicles. And what are you hearing from fleet managers on the rate of their EV adoption?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of answers to the rate question. And what I find is when I sit down with fleet managers and we start talking about EV adoption, there's a couple of real challenges. I mentioned that I worked in the commercial EV manufacturing space. And one of the first lessons I learned was probably the hardest thing to do in an EV conversion to 100% is to go from 0 to 1. And the reason is that it's not as simple as a different fuel system to power the vehicle. When I sit down with customers in EV workshops, I have 2 slides that go through all of the things that we've got to think about when we're making this change. And I leave those slides in black and white because it's literally a gray area. There isn't a template necessarily. And so all of the fleet managers that we work with are kind of experiencing the same thing, which is, hey, we got to get to these electric vehicles, but now we got to think about charging. Do we charge them at home? Do we have a depot here? How do we train drivers? It's a different driving experience. How do we do repairs? If you pull in a commercial electric vehicle into a maintenance shop right now, a lot of your technicians are going to step back and say, I have no idea what to do here. They don't want to touch it. How do we help get to a place where your maintenance program is healthy and safe? And it also changes, what do we need to have as far as parts availability? When you go from internal combustion engine to an electric, you're going from 2,000 moving parts to less than 100. Completely changes how you model your maintenance bay programs, how we make sure we have inventory on hand. So all of those pieces really have to be worked through in this. And I think the challenge when we look, if you pull up a ESG statement from a public company, you've got these really big expectations from the CEO leadership team. We're going to be 100% in 10 years or 12 years. And then we come back and we sit and talk to the folks that are doing it, and they're like, I have no idea how I'm going to do that. Right? We got supply chain challenges. We got vehicle retirement rates. We got a lot of work to do. So if that's you, if you're feeling that right now, it's okay. That's kind of the norm in this EV conversion space. And, we've also got other alternative fuels. There's hydrogen fuel cells. There's other types of systems that are going to come into play. And so I think there are a lot of questions. And I think the best thing to do is really sit down and talk through, like from a beginning to end, what does this mean to us organizationally? And again, have a workshop and go through all of those pieces so that we can understand who gets impacted, how do we help bring them along in that journey. And then, we still have a little bit of supply chain constraint in commercial electric vehicles. So as those come in, you'll be ready because you've got your depot planning, you've got your driver training, you've got your safety training. All those things are ready when you start to get 1,000 or 2,000 new electric vehicles into your fleet.
Mm-hmm. So we hear a lot about how EVs generate more data. For those fleet operations that have both the ICE and the EVs in their fleets, how does a technology or a telematics application differ in the deployment for one type of vehicle versus another? I know you mentioned maintenance and parts, but what are some differences that telematics can accommodate in monitoring and making these vehicles more efficient?
Yeah, I think one of the things is really trying to build platforms that keep it a single pane of glass to the best of our ability. Because from an operational standpoint, a vehicle's a vehicle, and we've got to get to our customers, we've got to get to our deliverables. And so trying to keep that a single pane of glass, but then there do have to be some different call outs on the map. I mentioned availability of charging stations. You think about it, we would need to understand what's our state of charge right now at any point throughout the day. Do I have someone who might need to pull over and find a charging station, which may be a challenge? That type of real-time information really gets surfaced in the platform along with your ICE vehicles in a slightly different way, but it will help you understand what's our state of charge. You can see if vehicles are charging. Those types of changes really are platform kind of pop-up call-outs. When we think on the back end of the system, one of the things that's still really heavily influencing our decisions in converting EV vehicles, not about if, but maybe when and where, is the fact that we've got a lot of government incentives out there. And some of them are federal, a lot of them are state or regional. So with that comes some extra reporting sometimes. We have to have reporting around the utilization of this incentive. So when you think about complying with the report requirements, that's an important part of really understanding. When I go out and I get a vehicle and I've got 40% off because I got this grant, what do I have to have in return for that grant? And how do we leverage our telematics system to create a network to just export the data, have it available so that we can continue to provide what we need there. And then the other piece is you've got internal requests, right? We're going to want to see, what are we really impacting? How is this really impacting our fuel utilization, our particulates we're putting into the atmosphere? How many miles are we driving that are EV versus ICE? What's our real payoff in the end? Because we're doing this from a sustainability standpoint and from an environmental standpoint and a governance standpoint. And we want to be able to feed all of those successes up through our leadership groups so they understand what the investment's really doing to address those key factors that led us down the road in the first place.
Okay. There's a third emerging trend here I'd really like to get to because we hear about it all the time. What hope can you give fleet managers on some relief from the driver shortage?
Well, I'll do my best. That's a big ask, right? Because, if you look back since 2009, we've been somewhere between 250,000 and 450,000 commercial driving jobs open in the U.S. every year. It is an ongoing challenge. And I think there's a bit of a silent challenge in this that some folks on this call probably experience every day. And that's really looking at commercial licensed driving professionals. But what we have oftentimes in our world is I'm hiring someone because they're an excellent HVAC technician, and then they drive to get to their job. So we're not necessarily hiring professional drivers, and that can create a challenge. You hop out of a Honda Accord and you get into a Class 6 commercial vehicle. It's a different experience. It's going to take that extra training. So what we can share is really leveraging technology can help with the driver shortage and some of the driver experience from a standpoint of having drivers come in and really getting the training up front that we need and that real-time feedback in the vehicle as they're operating our vehicles. The other piece of it is really looking at the efficiency modeling. The reality for today is we got to think about, how did we build our routes? When did we make our decisions about how we drive, and what technology was applied to that? And sometimes you may just look around and be like, well, Martin does that and he's really good at it. However, if we can apply technologies that help Martin view the efficiencies of the model, you may be able to get more density in your routes, move one or two vehicles off of the road, or have those vehicles that are sitting there waiting for drivers no longer be a negative impact on your business because you've figured out a way to improve efficiencies. And when we think through electric vehicles, the one thing I can tell you about electric vehicles is, in every one of the customers that I've worked with where we put a driver into an electric commercial vehicle, they never wanted to go back. So one thing I can tell you is that electric vehicles are going to make a lot of people want to drive for your company, because it's a completely different experience, from performance, noise, exhaust. They love it.
Yeah, and they can really go zoom also in EVs. I've certainly noticed that difference.
Yeah, it's a significant difference.
So in terms of the agility and the flexibility that a telematics system can provide, what are the advantages of fleet flexibility, and how does it apply to routes, to duty cycles, to real-time service demands?
Yeah, I think that agility really is around having access to that real-time data and the ability to have those what-if conversations, right? Again, we go back and we look at it. It's about understanding, what are the routes we drive today? How do we come to that conclusion? And how can we use technology to get better at that? Then being able to add in that context that you asked about in commercial navigation systems to say, look, we got road closures, we got weather, we got DOT limitations. Which vehicle is closest that can solve this problem for us? So by being able to take that bird's eye view of all of our assets and all of our employee resources in the field in real time, when something comes up, you've got a much better chance to make the best decision because of the information that's living inside of your fleet management portal and systems. And that's really where we see the biggest opportunity of growth, is getting that bird's eye view, an all-encompassing, not just dots on a map, but what type of vehicle, right? How long do we think they're going to be there? Are they taking planned versus actual routes? Can we become more efficient with that? Duty cycles and real-time service demands, we're able to pull in engine codes and odometer readings and all of that to feed better real-time information into your maintenance teams, so that they've got information at their fingertips. They're not walking around doing personal inspections on vehicles. The drivers are doing verified inspections before and after, so we can bring up any maintenance concerns that are off cycle. All of those agility factors can be improved with a telematics and fleet management system that really gives you the holistic bird's eye view of all of my assets, all of my human resources, and all of the information that I can get, so we can make the best decision.
Mm-hmm. And how does agility apply to customer expectations? You were alluding earlier to how those expectations have changed in terms of them wanting to track things on their smartphones. But how can telematics technology better accommodate assessing customer expectations and then having the flexibility to meet them?
Yeah, and I think that with the information that you can pull out from our systems, you're able to go back and really think about, what is our customer base, right? What's our target market, be it by zip code or by demographic, whatever that might be. And then how do we overlay this telematics information to look at how we address that? And when we think through, again, I talked earlier about, where's the value in having two of my trucks on the same road at the same time? Is there not an opportunity to become more efficient in that? And sometimes it's the only way to get the job done, but oftentimes there's a better way for us to accommodate more customers by really looking at the efficiency with how we deliver. And when we think through also in situations, I live in a rural part of the country, so power outages happen from time to time. And I'm really impressed with our local utility and how they respond to that. When you talk to folks that are in businesses like grid management, everyone's a driver when the power goes out. Everyone is on board. And so having the ability to leverage technologies, know who can drive what type of vehicle, who's closest to that type of resolution spot, is really going to help you get those, let's call them emergencies, right? Let's get those emergencies taken care of. Let's get those high priority customers taken care of, because we've got the visibility of not just the vehicle, but who can be associated with that to best serve that challenge.
So I'd like to move on to next steps. I know you've covered a lot of material in this webinar. For those fleet managers who are taking this all in and trying to figure out their first few moves towards telematics adoption, what do you advise at this point?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about really identifying your top challenges, and some of that has been brought out with the data that we got from our survey respondents. But the other piece is reviewing your current technology programs. I talked about a workshop where you just lay everything out. And this is what we use, this is who uses it, this is how it benefits the customer. Lay it out on the table and really review your current technology programs. And look, paper and pencil is still a technology, right? That is a part of this. And so we want to uncover every bit that we can in how your business operates. And then you want to identify those technology gaps. And as you look in this, at step 5, it says talk to fleet management partners. As someone who works in the technical solutions organization, I can tell you the sooner you talk to me, the better I can help understand and maybe create that technology gap sheet for you. Because I think one of the challenges that folks on this call might run into is you don't know what's available. You don't know what you don't know. And so when you identify a technology gap and you start setting goals, you may not recognize there's a larger gap there, or that there's a technology that can easily be inserted and immediately go resolve that with a return on investment in under a year, right? So getting those conversations sooner is always better, but really setting goals. One of the challenges that we have when we work with customers, we do a pilot and we ask for success criteria, right? Like, how are we going to know if this really works well? And that might be one of the most difficult conversations we have because it's tough to define. So the better you can get at really setting goals for your organization, thinking of it in terms of, we want to improve safety. Great. That's a great goal. How are we going to measure that, right? Really spend some time getting into the measurement of what you want to accomplish so that you're really clear on that improvement cycle. And then, talking with management partners of technologies and then budgeting for that new technology. We're getting ready to turn the calendar on another year. Some of these budgets may already be in place, but you identify something that you've really got to figure out a way to get into your organization. Maybe we can find an efficiency somewhere else that creates a saving to cover that cost, right? So there may be some shell game that has to go on in your budget, depending upon what you learn about your technology gaps. But this is really the 6 steps that we go through with customers. We do it ourselves as an organization. Verizon runs a fleet of 23,000 vehicles. So we have this experience. I work with those fleet managers every year as they're reviewing their own technology and their gaps for the future. So those are the steps that I would recommend. And again, it really starts getting a room, just throw everything on a table and really get an inventory of what it is that you've got out there today and how you want to go after your top challenges.
All right. I know there's more we can talk about. And we certainly appreciate your very thorough presentation. I'd like to move on to our audience. And with the time that we have remaining, let's answer a few of the questions that came through during the presentation. And I'd like to remind the audience that we do have a chat function. You're welcome to ask questions as they occur to you. But one of the very practical questions that came in was, how does this system correlate to real-time road closures? Seems like we encounter those every day.
Well, so that's a challenge, right? Real time is obviously a scary word for anything because road closures can happen in a moment's notice. However, what we're utilizing now is we're utilizing more artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I guess the best example that I could give you is when you use Google Maps, like we talked about on your application for your phone, it'll reroute you even though deep down in your heart, you know that you know the best lane, right? I'm going to go this path because Google's wrong. And then you go that path and you find out there's an accident or you find out there's an unexpected water main that broke, right? That is all leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it looks at all of the vehicles on the road and it gathers that data and it starts to assess what's going on there. We continue to apply that in our commercial navigation as well. So that same type of technology, don't always get road closures reported unless they're going to be long-term extended road closures. So oftentimes what we have to do is really just go out and cull information from our fleet, from all the vehicles that we've got on the road, 2.5 million vehicles, and we assess that information with AI and machine learning. And those will continue to get better and continue to get faster in our responses to those types of challenges. But real-time road closures, they can be difficult because they are unscheduled, unplanned, and unsanctioned oftentimes. And so nobody's calling us to say, hey, this road is closed. We'll leverage technology to get in front of that.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the magic word, AI, and that prompts kind of another additional question here. Tell us a little bit about the increasing use of AI in telematics and technology that could boost the operational quality of fleets in the next few years.
Yeah, artificial intelligence and machine learning really are the buzzword, right? It's hard to have a conversation without talking about somebody's ChatGPT experience or something of that nature, right? But how it applies in our world is different. ChatGPT is a large language model. We can use that for customer support chat and things like that, but we apply artificial intelligence in a bit of a different way. The video cameras, the AI dash cam that we have actually has 3 different layers of artificial intelligence in it. So it's got computer vision, it's got edge artificial intelligence, and then it's got a cloud video analytics engine. That type of technology is going to continue to become more robust and more mature as it learns how our drivers behave, how our vehicles behave. And then what that'll do is that'll give us even more data into our data lakes. And we're actually applying artificial intelligence right now to our data lakes and really creating what we're calling a business insights platform. So the goal here would be when you log into your Verizon Connect platform or whoever's else telematics platform you're using, you want to go in, you know the reports you want to see because those are your business outcomes. We identified them as addressing gaps, and that's what I'm going to focus on. But think of a time where a pop-up message could come up and say, hey, we've got an insights report for you. And this insights report has looked at your entire fleet. It's looked at all of the key performance indicators that we track, and it's found a correlation that isn't obvious to you and isn't in a pre-canned report. And it pulls this correlation out and it says, hey, here's what we found. In vehicles that are in this class that operate in this region, you've got 25% worse fuel economy. Here's some things that we think play into that. Let's do some what if scenarios and let's go test that, see if we can improve in fuel economy in that region, in that class of vehicle. That type of artificial intelligence analytics could be a significant improvement to your efficiencies and cost controls. And it wasn't something you thought about until you logged into our platform. So that's one model, right, is business insights. Another model that's really become kind of a hot topic as well is utilizing AI for facial recognition and identification of employees and things of that nature. And on the surface, it sounds like a really great idea, but then there's some courts and attorneys that have disagreed with that idea at times, right? So what we're working through now is how can we use AI models to better associate driver behaviors and association to vehicle, but maybe stay away from some of the biometrics that might be involved in that. So utilizing artificial intelligence in a slightly different way to solve for a challenge, which is sometimes it's difficult to know who's driving which vehicle and how they're behaving because we may have a manual back-end system. Somebody jumped in a vehicle in an emergency. How do we associate those folks? So we're applying AI to solving that problem as well.
I'd like to get back to safety because it's such an important topic. What specific safety advances and amenities can fleets look forward to because of deeper, richer telematics data as this system evolves?
Yeah, I think the next iteration of safety from a technology perspective, again, is going to take on artificial intelligence and machine learning, kind of telling us what we don't see, drawing those correlations together, helping us understand causation and correlation. And when you think through what that model is going to look like, right now in today's world, we have thresholds that tell us when something's of concern. So a harsh braking event or a rapid acceleration event or a lane departure event. Those types of triggers, they're pretty obvious and they've got some sort of mechanical force behind them that tells us, hey, this has occurred. What we are starting to look at now is the context from around the vehicle. So the addition of more cameras, the ability to analyze more information. Are we in a position where we can alert you to things that occur when nothing in your vehicle occurred that was out of the ordinary? How can we contextualize someone else's potential driving? right? Bringing that in is really going to help us from a safety perspective, again, to try and avoid accidents as opposed to watching a replay of it on a video. And that's where we're going to see these next level contextualizations come through. We'll also see more artificial intelligence really help us from a safety perspective. Again, when we get into that analytics engine and we start looking in the entire data lake, we can come back to you with benchmarks, because the reality is, when you set up your own scorecard system, it's based on what you think your goal is. Well, what if we come back and find out that your goal is actually 20% lower than the industry average? You may be feeling like you're doing quite well, but by not having that benchmark, you may not realize where the opportunity really lies, how far out you can go with these goals. So being able to create benchmarking, again, analyzing the data across all of the connected vehicles that we have, and coming back to you and saying, hey, in your industry, in that vehicle class, this is really the benchmark. Here's where you are. You're above or below. Like, how can we help?
I'd like to squeeze in one more question in the 3 minutes we have left. You've talked a lot about data and how much is generated. When it comes to just connecting, analyzing, segmenting all of this data, how much of it is done automatically, and how much of it needs to be done on the fleet, on the side of the fleet operations? Does it get to a point where a fleet operation needs a full or a part-time analyst?
You know, in typical technical fashion, the answer is it depends, right? It really depends upon your organizational level of, data scrutiny. We work with some customers who are small but really value data. They have someone who's in charge of analyzing data, and what they really want to do is they want to access their data through an API so they can get it in and just grind through it on their own, right? Like that's their existence model, is really grinding the data. In other organizations, they come to us and say, hey, I need this information, and we can go to our platform and, hey, here's pre-made reports. Here's how you can customize it. Here's how you can create a scorecard for it. So what we're really working towards is having the right answer for where your organization is. If you're an organization that wants to consume a lot of data and just have it exported from us, we've got a model for that. If you're an organization that is large but doesn't have your own headcount for data, we actually have a professional services group that can come out and help with that. So we can create the business intelligence that you need in a custom platform. So there's a lot of different ways to address that. It really is about meeting you where you're at and understanding how you want to see that data.
All right, Terry, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for so many insights. For anyone who asked a question that wasn't answered, we will be following up via email to answer them individually. We hope that all of you have enjoyed today's webinar. I want to again thank Terry and Verizon Connect for today's presentation. This webinar will be available on demand on the Automotive Fleet website at automotivefleet.com/webinars and at the Verizon site at www.verizonconnect.com. Verizon will also send you the full copy of the Fleet Technology Trends Report that was referenced throughout this webinar. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again here for another Automotive Fleet webinar. Have a great rest of the day.